Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P. Joe Pisapia. That, of course, is Dan Harris and Kyle Yates. And it's you! And it's Week 14 on the Waiver Wire. Week 13 just about in the books. Week 14 now ahead of us. This is that last week before we get to the new playoff push. So we have to adjust our brains here according to the weeks. And hopefully you're not playing in Week 18 like a crazy person. Because I'm just telling you right now, you've done all this work for nothing if you're still playing in Week 18. So we've got a few short hours here to get all these waiver wires together. And Dan Harris, I will start with you today. Welcome you to the show. It is very nice to see you. And I got to ask you, I'm sure you watched the Jet game yesterday. So is there a quarterback controversy going on now with the Philadelphia Eagles with my boy Gardner Minshew and his fabulous mustache?
So much swag on that guy. I don't actually think so. I mean, Joe, if you were the quarterback for the Eagles, you probably could have completed like 75% of your passes against the Jets defense. So I don't think so. But Minshew did play well, and they cruised to an easy win. I imagine that Jalen Hurts will be the starter coming out of the bye, and that there will not be a quarterback controversy unless we get another Hurts versus the Giants effort coming out of the bye, in which case we might see Minshew come in there for a little bit.
And the only controversy going on with Kyle Yates right now, because he's under the weather, is which tea he's drinking. Which one out? Was it the chamomile or the Earl Grey today, Yates?
I got some chamomile. And if you were to ask me to name other teas other than chamomile or Earl Grey, I would fail 100%. Just like my efforts in trying to rank Mike Williams this year accurately. It has been an absolute disaster trying to predict what Mike Williams is going to do any given week. But no, I am here. I've got the Dayquil. I've got the tea. We're fighting through it. Let's roll.
I recommend the black tea with vanilla or just the regular green tea with lemon. I've become a tea guy recently because clearly I'm a golden girl. That's where things are going here.
I'm going to go the Ted Lasso route, which I think is to refer to tea as garbage water, which is what I basically am going to do going forward.
On that note, something that's not garbage is our giveaway that we're doing here in Fantasy Pros in the month of December. It is a signed Alvin Kamara jersey, so get in there while the getting's good. Head over to fantasypros.com/contest in order to enter, and all you have to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, our glorious YouTube channel that has every single podcast, every live stream where you can interact, ask us questions, short form videos, long form videos, pictures of Dan Harris's animals at his house, all kinds of things are up there. And all you have to do is subscribe, take a screenshot of that, then head over to fantasypros.com/contest and upload it, fill out the form, and just like that, an autographed Alvin Kamara jersey can be yours. And when you subscribe to our YouTube channel at Fantasy Pros, make sure you click that little notifications bell too, so you know every time a glorious piece of content drops. And today's show, as always, is powered by my Playbook's Waiver Assistant, which will display all of the ad drop scenarios that will improve your rosters right now in Week 14. Shows you the available players that will improve your team and by how much, and also the impact that some other players might have on some other rosters. So you could be a little proactive here because we're in the nitty-gritty now. We are in the end game. We're getting close to the playoffs, so this is more like the Infinity War, I think, right? Where we just eliminate half the teams in our league. So really, we're in the Infinity War. We'll be in the end game next week. But
good metaphor.
No, I try. Every now and then I exceed. Very, very, very rarely. FantasyPros.com/myplaybook is where you can get that waiver assistant. So without any further ado, let's use our waiver assistant and let's assist you in making waivers. See what I did there? Full circle stuff here. Let's talk about the running backs, and let's start with you, Kyle Yates. Put the T down for a second and talk to me about who your number one waiver wire running back is for Week 14 in the NFL.
Well, let's just say this. If you have to pick up a running back in Week 14 of the 2021 NFL season, I pity you. So we are going to talk about Rashaad Penny as the number one waiver wire pickup this week. And I do the player notes here for the waiver wire now at Fantasy Pros. And I wrote up for Rashaad Penny that Penny was the best running back on the field for Seattle this past week, but that's not exactly calling him Barry Sanders. Rashaad Penny here, 3.5 yards per carry, saw 10 carries to Adrian Peterson's 11. And normally we would not really be talking about Rashaad Penny as a waiver wire pickup this late into the season, but they get Houston this next week, and that is at least worthy of considering Penny as a mid-range running back 3 for this next week. But we are talking about a 4% fab bid, like minimal fab bid, and that is just because you are absolutely desperate and need to be able to field the running back spot on your roster. You get outside of that, you go to Tevin Coleman, Adrian Peterson, Rex Burkhead. Like, none of these guys are doing it for me where they're going to outrank Rashaad Penny this week. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Rashaad Penny at the number 1 spot.
Yates, in all of your leagues, how much fab combined have you spent on Rashaad Penny over the season?
This season? 0. I actually have not picked up Rashaad Penny.
Really?
That's
because he drafted him.
Because I drafted him everywhere. Yeah, you guys got me.
Oh, so how much would you spend on Rashaad Penny today, just to be clear?
I just said like a 4% fab bid, and
4%?
that's really because you are desperate.
Okay, 4%. Let's move over to you, Dan Harris here, who is your number 1, if there is one, running back ad for Week 14.
There has to be someone. If there's a running back that you could possibly add, it is Rashaad Penny as well for Yates. So this week, as Yates said, is not the week that if you need a running back, you're excited about the waiver wire, because there just is nothing there. And yeah, Penny, he didn't look great. He did also have the 27-yard catch, Yates, which, so in the end, it's 6, carry the 1, but 62 yards total or whatever it is. So that's worth something. And again, they do get Houston. And the remaining schedule, by the way, if Penny is able to sort of break out from this just giant group of kind of mediocre running backs right now, it's not that bad. I mean, they have the Rams, then Chicago, Detroit, so you can get by with it if he earns a role, which he should, because Adrian Peterson, obviously, despite the touchdown, just should not be there and should not be taking carries away from anybody. Alex Collins, obviously, is battling injury and he was inactive. Penny is a guy, Yates, who you and I were both advocating drafting during this draft season, because we saw there was a plausible path for him to be an impact player if he could, A, stay healthy, which he never can, and B, if something happened to Chris Carson, which eventually it did. And now we're sort of at that point. Penny is the guy who they once drafted to be the guy, and he has shown he can be successful on the field. I can't imagine, Yates, that you and I, and Joe, you two, are going to rank him as a starter this week, other than a deep flex option against Houston. But he is somebody who I think, if you're absolutely desperate, if you're in a 16-team league especially, maybe you could find a way to start. And it's possible, Joe, I know you said you're looking more forward to the playoffs, that he carves out a role for himself and can be somebody usable as we get a couple of weeks down the road into your fantasy playoffs if you're desperate for running back. So he is my top guy. Bidding, Joe, I think the percentage of fab is kind of irrelevant at this point, right? It's whatever you need, but I agree with Yates that he is worth a minimal fab bid because he's not particularly enticing.
I just think it's hilarious that we're still talking now, too, about Adrian Peterson again. A few weeks ago, it was, Adrian Peterson's going to be the guy in the Tennessee Titans, and I don't know, man. I feel like there wasn't enough of us. I know I tried to, pump the brakes a little bit on that stuff, but now we're talking about Adrian Peterson, too, in another backfield. I can't even believe that we're here again and this cycle of Adrian Peterson. So I don't know where you had your bingo card for the Seattle Seahawks guys for Adrian Peterson, but you could check that one off. We'll see if there's enough time in the rest of the season for him to go somewhere else. There might be. Just hold your nose and hold
Did
your
you
breath.
hear? You were on the show, Joe. But we talked. Dan, did you hear us on Wednesday talk about Adrian Peterson?
Yeah.
He's got his basement set up and he's looking at all his jerseys hung up and he's like, you know what? Something's missing here. Something's missing. I feel like that's what
It's
Adrian
like
Peterson's doing
Pokemon
right
with him.
now.
He collects jerseys like Pokemon. It's crazy. He's just trying to get them all.
In the FantasyPros Dynasty League, Yates, my running back situation, it's not the deepest, and my running backs coming into the year were Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, and Chris Carson. So I'm struggling there for it. And Adrian Peterson remains on my roster because I haven't, and I start that guy, and look, he falls into the end zone, and I get, 11 carries and 6.7, fantasy points. I will take it at that. So he's viable somewhere. And he is, by the way, my second pickup, because if he is going to get the goal line touches right now against Houston, you have to assume they will score some touchdowns there. And if you're absolutely desperate, but yay, Adrian Peterson, we'll be talking about him in 5 years, scoring touchdowns.
I'm going to take a different approach here with the guys for my number 1 back. In fact, I want the guy who scored 20 PPR points, and right now, before the end of the week closes on Monday night, is sitting at RB8 on the week. I want my boy Kenneth Gainwell, and I'm going to take a different approach to the guys, too. That's right. Well, at least me and Gainwell, you and Penny. I mean, you look at least there's been some games here where we can look at Kenneth Gainwell and go, well, he delivered a little bit. He was pretty good. I'm still waiting for the Penny game. But
I want to hit our producers up to, clip the number of times that Joe has recommended Gainwell
Yep.
as his number one running back pickup. This has got to be what, seven
Oh,
times
it's got to
so
be
far?
7 or 8 at this point.
But Joe, this is when you should have come in and taken the huge victory lap at the start of the show and been like, Kenneth Gainwell, told you, finally paid off. No,
right. I'm not doing that. But I will do this, and I will take the approach different than the guys. The guys are taking the approach for it's waiver wire, you're fighting for your life. I'm going to take the alternate route here, which is if you're doing waivers in week 14, chances are you're already a playoff team, right? If you're still in it and you're really, focused and looking for how to improve your team, then you should be looking past this silly bye week we've got coming up. And I will give this caveat. It is very dangerous to have Kenneth Gainwell because you don't know. It's just a fact of Gardner Minshew playing quarterback. Will Minshew play quarterback again after the bye? I don't know. Is there a quarterback controversy? Probably not, but stranger things have happened. That offense did look very good, although Dan is right. It was against the Jets. Maybe I could have thrown. I do have some very good footwork still going on that I could throw the football pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't know any of those factors. What I do know is Kenneth Gainwell is a talent. Kenneth Gainwell is a guy that they put draft capital in with this regime, and they're getting to a point now with Miles Sanders where I think everyone's losing patience. So I think it's important to have Kenneth Gainwell on your roster. We've had the health issues different times of Boston Scott, of Jordan Howard. I think it's just worth getting Kenneth Gainwell out of the pool so that somebody else at the very least can't pick them up. And if all of a sudden Kenneth Gainwell becomes a useful flex option in these last few weeks in the playoffs, that's something to consider. That's my approach, and I'm not spending a lot. I wouldn't go, into the 20% left of my fab, below my fab. But I'm, depending on my situation, I'm willing to add Kenneth Gainwell at a reasonable cost. That's where I'm at. Yes, Dan, I see you're very anxious to speak.
I just nod. I have a very difficult time standing still during bad. No, so look, I understand that, Joe. Like, I completely understand the approach. Obviously, the Eagles are on a bye this week, so you are taking the approach. They have a pretty easy schedule here going forward, so he could factor in. But obviously, like, a lot of his work, not all of it, because he was involved, came after Sanders got injured. And maybe Sanders is going to be injured, coming out of the bye. Who knows? It was his ankle. He looked to be in a lot of pain. But also, Boston Scott, it seemed like they didn't give him any touches because he was getting over the illness. So once he's over the illness, like, he had pretty much carved out a role. Jordan Howard may be back at the end. So for me, Joe, at the same time, I'm making it clear, like, I don't hate that whatsoever because we don't know that Jordan Howard is going to be back. Miles Sanders may be out, and coming out of the bye, you might have them say, wow, Gainwell looked pretty darn good in this game. Maybe it finally is time to feature him. So totally fine with him as a pickup. For me, one of the reasons I do prefer Penny is because I do see a scenario where a guy who got, 11 touches yesterday, now faces Houston, looked as the best running back on the team, could perform. And I do think that there are plenty of fantasy managers, myself included, by the way, in some leagues, who are still interested but have not yet locked up the playoff spot, right? Like people who need to go. And I think it's an equal chance that Penny is as valuable going forward. So I want to make it clear, Joe, I don't hate it whatsoever. I think it's interesting, and I think he is worth a pickup. To me, there's just too many impediments with all the other running backs there for me to think that he's really going to be able to emerge.
That is absolutely fair. And to be honest, Jordan Howard is my 2. For kind of the same reasons. I don't know where this Eagles backfield is going.
Right.
They've got a week to sort it out. I just want to get it now and get it cheap during the bye. Because you know what? If they come out like gangbusters after the bye and then everybody in that second round of the playoffs then starts adding these guys, that's a potential problem for me. So I'm trying to not only mitigate my risk, but also, make sure that I have some guys on my roster that I can pick and choose because we don't know where these weeks go now going forward. Everything's been so volatile in that backfield to begin with. And I'll tell you what, my problem with Penny, just to inverse that argument for you guys, is the fact that Adrian Peterson walked in there and got as many carries as he did. I thought that was even a lot of carries for him. So that concerns me the most, is that all of a sudden, Adrian Peterson walks off the street, carries the football 10 times. Should that have even happened with a guy like Penny, who's been in this offense for years, plural now? That is my big issue with Penny too. And look, you guys are probably right. Penny probably will be that guy. But Yates, when you're looking at Rashaad Penny, how much should you factor in Adrian Peterson? And the way I'm picking up Howard too, or at least looking at him, should anybody be looking at Adrian Peterson even though he's 105 years old?
Well, here's the thing. Like, if you're Seattle, like, who are you going to want to give the majority of the work to? Is it the running back who you spent first-round draft capital on that hasn't stayed healthy? Maybe you want to prove that this guy actually is worthy of that selection. Now, he's not. He's not going to be. But yet, like, is that who you want to give the majority of the touches to? Or Adrian Peterson, who is walking in off the street who hasn't played for the majority of the year and is now on his second team at this point of the season. So I think moving forward, that's kind of the narrative, is like, if you're Seattle and you at least now see that Rashaad Penny can make it through a game, then at least you want to be able to like
One
game. Start to be able to like build upon that. So I don't know. We're wasting a ton of breath talking about Rashaad Penny and Adrian Peterson and Kenneth Gainwell at this point, because with Gainwell, here's the thing, like I actually would prefer to pick up Jordan Howard over Gainwell, because I feel like Howard at least has more of a solidified role, because we've done with Gainwell already this year. Like we've seen that he has a good game, and then the next game he's inactive. Like he's the odd man out.
But it's never his
here,
fault. I guess that's the issue I always have. It's never his fault. It's always
No, Gainwell is an incredible talent, and I've been advocating for Gainwell all throughout draft season and everything like that. I said Gainwell was a very, very talented player. I didn't think that he deserved to fall to the 5th round of the NFL draft. But Gainwell in this offense, where we've seen him come out and we chased after that. Remember that Detroit game? We chased after that. And then the next week he's inactive. So you look at the percentage chances of which one is the odd man out, because they're probably not going to carry 4 running backs onto the active roster when they come out of the bye. So who's the odd man out? Is it Boston Scott, who is going to be healthy at that point, plays special teams, or is it going to be Gainwell? And Howard looked fantastic as a runner before he got injured. So there's a lot of volatility there. I think it's Rashaad Penny if you need a 1-week play, Tevin Coleman as like in that same kind of territory, and then really like the rest of these guys is like fall into the sure category for me, right? Whenever anyone asks me like, should I pick up this guy? Sure. Like that's kind of just where we're at with any of these other running backs. Like, sure, you can pick them up, but I really don't see the path there for Gainwell to be the guy coming out of the bye week. I just don't see that happening.
I will give the one path for Gainwell. And again, I'm not the one who's saying go pick him up. The path for Gainwell is Miles Sanders is still hurt and is unable to come back, and Jordan Howard is not ready to come back. And then it's him and Boston Scott. Now, even with that, Yates, you're right. Boston Scott's probably the guy who's going to have more value. But if that's the case, if it is just the two of them, then Gainwell is the guy, and there's at least potential. And I don't want to put words in Joe's mouth, but I do think, Joe, that your essential strategy is right now. I'm assuming people who need to pick up a running back are in the playoffs already, so I don't care about the fact that he's on a bye this week. And there is the highest upside with Gainwell and a plausible path to him being kind of an impact player, and he's pretty much the only running back that I see that's out there that has that. Is that basically a fair way to sum up how you feel?
It's also how I feel that, unlike a lot of these other guys, when Gainwell gets the football, he's very good. The problem is when they choose to get him the football, and I'm wondering at this point in the Eagles season, if they start looking at that and you start evaluating that as a head coach and you go, you know what? He wasn't active after we did this. We didn't get him the football more. We watched this offense run with Gardner Minshew yesterday, and we're watching him catch the football out of the backfield. We're watching him participate in the offense. And if we want one thing this year that we've learned potentially about these ankle injuries is they tend to linger. So my concern with Jalen Hurts is it's a little different from Jalen Hurts than your regular stand-in-the-pocket quarterback, because so much of his game is based on running the football. That concerns me a little bit. And I'm kind of curious if Gardner Minshew does get another start. I know everyone's like, nah, forget it. He'll have the extra week of the bye. And how many times have we seen these guys come out of bye and then not play? I mean, how many times do we have to get beat over the head with this? I just think it's an insurance policy right now. I don't know about any of these guys starting them. So I'd rather just get the best talent insurance policy. That's how I'm approaching the waiver wire this week. And I think you guys are probably 100% correct on the other end of the spectrum of, hey, this is the one guy who maybe a guy like Penny could show out there. Is it a guy like Tevin Coleman too, Dan? Is there another guy? Is Tevin Coleman a guy that is worth adding to any roster this week, in your opinion?
I do think that Coleman would be an okay add if they didn't have the Saints coming up right now. With the Saints, there's no way that you could ever possibly find yourself in a scenario. Like, I'll probably want to start Rashaad Penny against Houston over Tevin Coleman against the Saints. Coleman has been more impressive. He has gotten more of the work than I expected, generally speaking, through here. He still doesn't have the pie all to himself. Then they get Miami, then Jacksonville, then Tampa Bay. I mean, there's just, I think the bottom line is this. With Coleman, who I have third, like whatever, there's just such a low percentage chance that he's going to be a guy who you can start going forward and feel okay about it. There's a higher chance with a guy like Penny, even with a guy like Gainwell, going forward, than I think there is with a guy like Coleman. So to me, Coleman is like, if you're in like a 20-team league and you're dying at running back and he's available, then fine. But given the fact that it's the Saints, it's not something I can go after.
It's kind of surprising to me that Tevin Coleman is 41% rostered, just generally speaking, when you take everything into account in FantasyPros. And then Jordan Howard's just 11% rostered. I would have thought that would have been way closer, Dan.
Well, I think really it's just because of the fact that with Howard being injured, and then once certainly the news came out that he wasn't going to play, then they have a bye. Like it's.
You think a lot of people just dropped him right off the
Yeah,
bat during
sure.
that?
I think that 11% is not where Jordan Howard was when he was, getting, producing.
Where it
and
was
healthy.
on Friday, maybe.
Correct. Or no, not even that. But yeah, with the bye. But also, by the way, I will say this: like, we don't know that Jordan Howard's coming back in Week 15. Like, we hope, like maybe, but who knows exactly what it is. So with Howard, look, Joe, if Miles Sanders is hurt and not able to play Week 15, Jordan Howard may be the most valuable running back on the Eagles, and he may have a huge day. But for now, again, all these guys are so uninspiring. Like, I hate it. That's why Penny is, and to your point, Joe, yeah, Adrian Peterson factored in heavily, but Penny, has been injured for most of the season. He's not going to walk into 20 touches in that game against the 49ers no matter what. While now that he showed 11 touches yesterday, maybe that goes to 15, 16 against Houston. That's sort of a valuable guy.
All right, Yates, any closing arguments here for any other running back that you want to make adding?
Carlos Hyde is at the bottom of the list, and punt Urban Meyer to the moon. That's my thoughts.
There you have it. All right, let's switch gears here over to the wide receivers, and let's talk about them, because this is a much better group to talk about. So thank goodness all that running back stuff is out of the way. Yates, let's start with you here on the wide receivers. Who is your number one ad at the wide receiver position in Week 14?
It's interesting. You make these start-sit decisions as a fantasy manager. You make these calls as a fantasy analyst. And my starts of the week last week were Russell Gage and Christian Kirk. One of them exceeded expectations immensely. The other one just completely busted. Russell Gage, 130 receiving yards yesterday, 12 targets. He's now seen 27 targets over his last 3 games. And he is the option that is producing in this Atlanta offense. So I think moving forward, we need to talk about Russell Gage not only as like a player that is worthy of being picked up and spending. Like, I've got him as an 8% fab bid. Like, he's worthy of being picked up, but then also is now moving into like must-start territory because so many other receiving options in that wide receiver 3 range, like Cortland Sutton, these guys are just not producing. They're not doing anything. And Russell Gage is. So I think moving forward, we need to put Russell Gage in this like mid-range wide receiver 3 territory, very high floor. We know that he can produce because he's doing it here. And I think down the stretch, he's going to be a very valuable fantasy asset. So he is absolutely worthy of being picked up. But there is another player here who I do view in that same kind of territory of fab bid.
I want to follow up on Russell Gage for a moment, if I will. Last 2 weeks, he had Jacksonville and Tampa. Those are pretty good matchups. This week, he has Carolina, much better secondary. So does that change anything for you in terms of Russell Gage, or you still feel the same way going into Week 14?
Is a great point, but I do think that he at least is still bringing a safe floor. We know that Atlanta is not going to like be in favorable game scripts, right? They're not going to. Maybe against Carolina with their quarterback situation, but with Atlanta, we know that they're going to have to throw the ball, and so that leads to Russell Gage providing that solid floor of 7, 8, 9 targets. And in the games where we do see them get behind, we could see, the 12 targets that Russell Gage saw this past week. So, yeah, I don't know if there's the upside necessarily in these matchups that are upcoming for Russell Gage as he did this past week. I'm not calling him to be this 130 receiving yard player every single week moving forward, but at least to, like I said, a mid-range wide receiver 3, someone who you can plug into your lineup and feel very confident in now. It's weird that we've come full circle with Russell Gage. We had some optimism on him at the beginning of the season, and then it was just like, get him off any roster. He was 0% rostered across fantasy football leagues. And now let's pick him back up because he could be a valuable asset in the playoffs.
Yeah, the absence of Calvin Ridley has really changed that paradigm, I think, quite a bit over these last few weeks. But look, I'm with you. Russell Gage is my number 2. I think it's a good ad despite the difficult potential matchups. He's got Carolina and San Francisco both on the road. Then he's got Detroit in Week 16 and Buffalo in 17. But still, hey, I had him in a couple DFS lineups this week, so I was very happy with Russell Gage and very happy with your call there, Yates. Let's go to you, Dan Harris. Who is your number 1 guy in the wide receiver board in Week 14 to add?
So I was telling you guys, we do sort of this collaborative waiver wire article, and we put it together, and we don't look at each other's stuff, obviously, and then it puts it together. And we were all over the place this week with especially our wide receivers, which is great. It's good to have difference of opinion. I like Gage a lot. I do get worried a little bit, again, about the matchups, Joe, as you aptly pointed out. And again, we are not that far away from him being like, okay, I think we could start Russell Gage now in a 3-target, 0-catch performance. So That's why he's number 2 for me. Number 1 for me is actually KJ Osborn. And the reason for me is because Adam Thielen suffered a high ankle sprain yesterday. They have a Thursday game, so he's obviously not going to be able to play in that, and chances are he's going to miss longer than that. And look, as wonderful as Justin Jefferson is not going to get 25 targets a game. And Kirk Cousins is throwing a lot. And you look at how Jefferson does when he gets a minimum of 6 targets. There have been 5 of those games so far this season, and in 4 of those, he either has 76 yards or a touchdown. He didn't do great in the other one, but this is the bottom line is, in the beginning of the season, guys, we think back, I feel like we were like, with the way they're focused right now, there's room for Justin Jefferson, there's room for Adam Thielen, there's room for this third pass catcher, and maybe that's going to be Osborn, and maybe it's going to be Conklin, and it turned out to really be neither one of them. Mm-hmm. But there is room for a second pass catcher on there without Adam Thielen, and to me, it's going to be Osborn, who does produce when he gets the targets. And again, now we've got something where they've got Pittsburgh, and it's a Thursday night, so regardless, a high ankle sprain you assume is going to be multiple weeks, but certainly at least this week. I think of all the guys we were talking about, given Gage's matchup, Yates, I think I will probably wind up with Osborn ranked the highest of everybody this week. And he's a guy who you might be able to play as a borderline wide receiver 3 going forward for as long as Thielen is out. So for me, he is the number 1, narrowly ahead of Gage, who I agree is also a pickup and a guy that you might just be able to rely on rest of the season. But the Thielen injury, the fact that it's, a quick turnaround here so he's going to be out is something. And again, a Thursday night game, defenses are always exhausted, especially the Steelers, who are coming off this really, really hard-fought game here against the Ravens. Just strikes me as a game that I'd be okay starting KJ Osborn in that, and I don't think you can say that about many of the guys. So he's my number 1.
I love, the addition, and I love the arguments you made. My concern is, the value of the targets that Adam Thielen's been getting quite a bit has been in the red zone. And that's where I wonder, is it going to be Osborn or is it going to be Conklin? I think Conklin could be a very interesting add if he's still on the waiver wire this week. We'll talk about tight ends later on, but that's where I struggle. It's going to be one of these two guys that I think benefits a great deal because we keep looking for that Thielen touchdown regression. It just hasn't happened, and he's been that go-to guy because you get Justin Jefferson getting so much attention and Dalvin Cook, up until his injury, getting so much attention in that red zone area that Thielen's just been open over the middle. So Osborn, fascinatingly enough, Dan, the most targets he received this year, you want to guess when that was?
Week 1.
That's right. Week 1, 9. Look at you, looking at the game log, having it up.
No, I was looking at Thielen's game log because I do want to point it out, Joe, because we talk about Thielen as this touchdown-dependent sort of wide receiver, and sometimes he is, for sure. The touchdowns are what puts him in that.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call him dependent, but I think the touchdown-rich is the best way to put it.
Look at his targets over the last several games. 13, 9, 7, 7, 10, 7. I mean, you're going to have Osborn walk into that role, if not, just as many, really, because you're now also taking away the Osborn, targets, although whoever you want to give them to, whatever. This is something where I agree that, he won't have quite the red zone presence, I'm sure, that Thielen has, but I'm not necessarily sure he needs that to be able to be a viable wide receiver 3.
If he did, we would be putting Osborn as a mid-range wide receiver 2,
right?
And that's not what you said. You said as a mid-range wide receiver 3, which I do agree with.
Yeah, and I'd love to see the spray chart of where those Thielen targets are coming, like where on the field, when during the game. Because if half of them are coming in the red zone, then that, or a third of them even, that tells you quite a bit too about how valuable those are. On the season. But look, I think Osborn's definitely an ad this week. I'm with you 100%. I think Gage is definitely an ad too. My number 1, though, is another guy. It's DeVante Parker. When DeVante Parker's back on the field, once again, he's got a bye, so nobody wants to add him this week. I want to spend all my money on guys that can't play this week. That's what I want to do because I'm looking ahead.
Bold strategy, Kyle.
We'll see if it works out there. But the reason, once again, I keep looking ahead. Do I want the best players for the playoff push, or do I want guys... Again, they're going to help me this week. It all depends on where you're at. So I am taking this other side here to try to offer an alternative for everybody out there that's already got their 9 wins, 10 wins, they're looking good, 8 wins even, that they've got their playoff spot and just want to add talent to their roster. Parker's that guy. He caught 5 of his 5 targets for 62 yards. He didn't have a touchdown yesterday. It's his first game back. The next couple weeks, he's got the Jets. Okay, we've already seen about the Jets, right? Stopping guys catching the football. He's got the New Orleans Saints, who can't stop anybody from throwing the football because Lattimore's lost a step or 3. And then Tennessee Titans, right? Another team you can throw the football on. So that is a terrific playoff schedule for DeVante Parker. I want that playoff schedule for DeVante Parker. I want him on my roster. And to that fact, too, this Miami Dolphin team is on a roll right now. They are playing really good football. They got a lot of confidence. So, yeah, I want to get DeVante Parker up and in my lineup, and I think this is a great opportunity here for to add him even cheaper than normal because people say, oh, he's on a bye, I don't want to add him this week, and I think that's a big mistake. Boys, where do you have DeVante Parker in your ranks this week?
Good, Yates.
I have him at 3. and I have KJ Osborn at 2.
Okay.
I alluded to Osborn earlier, was saying like the player who's right in that same range for me is Osborn with Russell Gage. 1 or 2 with Osborn and Gage, flip them, I don't care. The other one is right behind him, though, is DeVante Parker, who I talked about on the Waiver Wire podcast last week, and I said, like, he looks like he's starting to come back from IR. He's someone that's worthy of being picked up, because when he is active, he's providing a high floor, and that's exactly what happened here. Like, he stepped back into the lineup and immediately provided that high floor for fantasy managers as a flex play, or as a low-end wide receiver 3, depending on what your wide receiver situation looks like. And yes, you are absolutely correct. That schedule moving forward is beautiful. So I think the health, you obviously always have to worry about that with DeVante Parker.
Sure.
Like, he's one of these guys who could easily end up leaving halfway through a game. But when we are sitting down and doing projections, Parker's always going to end up as a wide receiver 3 with upside. He's one of these guys that you feel extremely confident plugging into your lineup. He drops down to 3 for me just because, like you said, he is on a bye. So I'm giving the edge to Gage and Osborn, who are going to have immediate value. But for the teams that are looking to make a deep playoff push, Parker absolutely needs to be added.
All right, so Yates, you gave us some information there as your number 3 with Parker. Give us your pitch for number 2 for KJ Osborn after Dan made him his 1.
Yeah, so Osborn, it's this very similar argument. It's Adam Thielen going down with injury, and there's an opportunity now. And Conklin did step up last week, but we also saw Osborn step into 7 targets, 4 receptions, 47 yards, and the touchdown. So with Osborn, he's had the talent, and we saw that in week 1. You know, you alluded to the 9 targets that he had in week 1, and that was, I remember that waiver wire. It was like, all right,
it was
Osborn
him and Kenneth Gainwell.
Yeah. Osborn coming out of freaking nowhere. All right, who is this guy? Is he worthy of being picked up? Because Osborn was out of Miami, a 5th round pick for Minnesota in the 2020 NFL draft. And he was like, we viewed him, like dynasty experts viewed him as like this special teams guy. He really wasn't going to be a known receiver necessarily, someone who stepped into a larger role, and he did that this season. And now it's a very narrow receiving tree in Minnesota. We get that, but when you have one of those top options go down, then you have Osborn able to step in. You talked about the Pittsburgh matchup, absolutely, but then also whatever week it is, week 15, we're going to have him face Chicago. And Adam Thielen likely not going to be back in that one too, and Chicago is allowing a ton of fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So I think Osborn is this guy that if you are looking to push your team over the top, if you're in this like must-win, win and you're in kind of game, Osborn would probably get the slight edge because of the matchup. Pittsburgh has been a terrible defense over the past couple weeks in every aspect. And I think Osborn would get the nod there. But, you got to kind of balance it out because Osborn's not going to have most likely the value all the way through the playoffs. So, yes, absolutely. Gage, Osborn, DeVante Parker, they're in a tier unto themselves where we can add them. We can pick them up. They're worthy of being picked up. And then after that, it's like all the other guys we talk about, sure, like you could pick them up.
Yeah. With Osborn for me, too, I look at, besides Chicago, I mean, the Rams, Green Bay's played very well defensively. I mean, that's the playoff schedule. He's got Pittsburgh this week. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm with you guys. I like Gage Osborn. I think he's a good player. I think he's a player that going forward next year, there's going to be a lot of attention on. It's like one of these like sleeper kind of guys you can add to your roster that might have a lot of value. But I'll still take Gage and Parker over him. Dan Harris, where are you at with your order here after you've got your 1 of KJ Osborn? Who was your 2 and 3?
It is Gage is number 2, and I will say that Parker's actually 4 purely because of the bye week, Joe. If you are viewing the waiver wire, if you are in the playoffs, and when I first did my waiver wire rankings late last night, Parker was number 1 overall, actually, and then I was just like, man, with the bye, it's just really hard for me to say that. But I do think everything you guys have said, he, of all the wide receivers, even Osborn, who I really like, comes with the highest floor. I mean, he had, 5 targets, caught all of them, and that's like his worst game of the season, right? He almost always sees 7 targets. That offense is working, and the schedule is good. So I would have him top there. So he does come to 4 purely because of the bye. Number 3, actually, for me, is MVS. And the reason is, again, 19 targets over the last 2 games at this point. Like, it's just something where, okay, if that's what we're going to see with Robert Tonyan out, and he actually is going to have this going forward, and they get Chicago, obviously, Yates, you were just talking about them, it's worth me picking him up to see whether or not this is sustainable. Do I think it is? Probably not, but I do think that there is a path for MVS to be a guy who, if you're going to get, I mean, take 25% of those targets away. Give him 7 targets a game. That's a guy who you're going to start getting, passes from Aaron Rodgers. So for me, it goes Osborn, it goes Gage, then it goes MVS, then Parker. But I will stress, again, Joe, if you're in your situation where you're in the playoffs, you're okay, you don't need somebody right now, but you need that kind of reliable guy, Parker would go to number 1 because I have the most faith in him returning value rest of season.
Over his last 4 weeks, he has 23 targets, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Obviously, 19 coming in the last 2, so obviously a little bit more. He's only caught 11 of them. And over those 19, he's only caught 8. That's the thing I always struggle with. It's the same thing that's been driving me crazy with, Van Jefferson the last few weeks. And obviously, he came off a decent week this week. But still, when you getting 7 targets but catching 3 of them, that always drives me crazy. Does that bother you at all about the MVS ad?
Sure. I mean, I'm not ready. He's not number 1 for me or anything like that. I mean, his average depth of target is 85 yards. So, they do have that. The catch rate is bound to be a little low with that. Absolutely, Joe. And I completely think that it's possible that Valdes-Scantling is just not going to be valuable, going forward. But I do think if you're going to get that, and again, then they get Baltimore, and there's a way, there's a path here certainly for Valdes-Scantling to be a viable guy. And again, with his depth of target, you can get away with catching 4 or 5 passes and still return value here. And again, we've hoped that this could happen for a while. I think how many ever waiver wire shows we've been doing over the last 2 years, how many times Valdes-Scantling has come up.
As many as we've talked about Rashaad Penny.
Exactly. It's it's right. Exactly. Yes, we could clip this and it would be an hour long just for it. But that's why he's not number 1 for me. I feel like when you're getting there, and as we're talking about it, I almost feel like I should probably move Parker even with the buy above Valdes-Scantling. But yeah, he's not somebody who I think this is your guy. Osborn, I think, reliable. Gage, pretty reliable. MVS, a little beneath that, but still worthy of a pickup.
All right, you guys have convinced me to move Osborn to 3. So now I've got Parker, Gage, and Osborn as my 1, 2, 3. So you've made enough good arguments there where, despite my concerns, I'm there. MVS is still 7 for me because I can't get that.
I'm not going to pound the table for MVS.
No, nor should you.
Although I want to know where Yates has him, actually.
Yeah, Yates, where do you have MVS?
I have MVS at 6. And it's kind of the same way that I talked about Deshaun Jackson last week, where it was Jackson is the guy that you plug into your lineup because you are projected to lose by a ton. You need that player that can supercharge your lineup as a flex option. That's what MVS can do. All it takes is one big play for MVS to finish with 15 plus half PPR points. So MVS very volatile. I think. You talked about Russell Gage. We're only a few weeks removed from him 3 targets, 0. We are only a few weeks removed from MVS with a 4-year career of doing nothing. But you got to downgrade him based on that. But he is falling into that same territory where if you are a win and in team, you have nothing to lose. You're not going to roll out someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown or one of these other guys that comes with a high floor, but that's not going to help you. You need that player who is going to push your lineup over the top. MVS should jump up near the top of the list for you.
Whenever there's MVS discussion, all I can harken back to is I want to say 3 years ago on this very show, somewhere around there, Tags and I having a knockdown, drag-out fight about MVS and Geronimo Allison. He was on the Geronimo Allison side, I was on the MVS side, and neither of us were right, clearly.
Yeah.
We're just miserable. We both lost. But you should have heard us, man. We were fighting it out, man. We had our stats, we had our reasons, we had all this stuff. I just can't shake that. So every time I see MVS, I think of Tags every single time. When you're looking at the rest of this board of wide receivers, too, you had Amon-Ra St. Brown have a big game. You had, obviously, Westbrook Kinye coming off a bye week here. He's got Jacksonville, good matchup there. Anything else here, Dan, that piques your interest when you look at the rest of this wide receiver board, and how much are you willing to even spend fab-wise on it?
Again, fab is entirely irrelevant, but these are guys who you can either let run through and then just pick up afterwards or spend the minimal amount of fab. The 5th guy, technically, for me, after the 4 that we've already talked about, is Kendrick Bourne, who hasn't even played tonight and has a bye next week anyway. So this is also a guy. But I do think that we were advocating for Bourne last week, and obviously 36.6% of managers agreed with us and everybody else did not. So he is a guy who, again, if you're in the same position as you, Joe, I mean, Bourne has kind of become a fairly reliable guy, but again, he's fit for me. After that, no, not really. I mean, Josh Reynolds and Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think I prefer Reynolds, actually, of the 2 as of right now. I have him ranked 1 spot higher just because he's, his last 2 games basically had 70 yards. Sterling Shepard, if he could ever get healthy, like Sterling Shepard was always a guy. Westbrook Akina, again, is who knows who's going to be healthy for that. But I'm not looking at anybody outside of those top five. I'd give a look to Bourne right now before seeing what he'll do tonight. But other than those top five, I'm basically entirely ignoring the wide receiver slate.
All right, Yates, how about you before we close it on wide receivers? Any other names that are interesting in deep leagues or for stashes right now?
Yeah, we're in the deep league conversation here with Amon-Ra St. Brown, just based on the target totals that he saw this past week. Going up against Denver, we've got Bryce Callahan out of the lineup, dealing with, I think, another injury. And Kyle Fuller, they were talking about it on the broadcast last night, has moved into the slot. Fuller is a great corner, or has been historically, but learning that new position, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, Detroit's gonna have to throw to keep up, as they always do. Congratulations, by the way, Detroit, on your first win of the season. And so I think St. Brown, still a safe floor. I'm buying into the talent level. I was on Amon-Ra St. Brown in the preseason, so buying into that. And then Kendrick Bourne at 5 for me. And then, like I said, MVS at 6. Outside of that, I mean, you're moving into like Jamison Crowder, Traquan Smith, Sterling Shepard. I'm not going after Sterling Shepard, like, just with the potential that Jake Fromm is the starting quarterback for New York this next week after being with the team for a week. So, yeah, outside of this, man, it is like you take your dart throw plays and you hope that it works out.
Oh, Dan Harris. I'm starting to love this idea of me playing quarterback in the NFL more and more. It seems like a lot of opportunities.
I mean, and going up against the Jets, you're good to go. We need my height and your athleticism, and we might have something going there.
Oh, man, we could put that Frankenstein together. What a glorious monster it would be. All right, when you're putting together a special breakfast, might I suggest to you the magic spoon? That's right. I've got it right here on the YouTube channel. You can see it here. Look at this glorious magic spoon for you. That's right, because I practice what I preach. It's delicious. It's good for you. And around the holidays, you're all eating too much pie. You're eating too many Christmas cookies, obviously. So you need to watch yourself at breakfast a little bit. And that's a perfect opportunity to get your magic spoon on. So grab a spoon and start eating, because it's got 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, only 4 net carbs, which obviously around the holidays you're eating a lot of carbs. This is a way to get rid of some of that carb. So it's low carb, it's keto friendly, gluten free, grain free, soy free, but not taste free, and it's only 140 calories per serving. This is my favorite right here. It's the cookies and cream one. I like the cookies and cream one. That's my favorite personally. But they've got the maple waffle. They've got the frosted, they've got the fruity, they've got all these amazing different options for you. And that's what you want when you have cereal. You want to be like Jerry Seinfeld, where you look at your cabinet and you see like 20 different cereals. Dan Harris, do you have a lot of cereals that are available in your house, or do you just have like that one box of cereal? What kind of house are you?
My house is actually made of 90% cereal boxes, and the rest are just whatever. I love cereal. Maple walnut, by the way, or maple waffle, I'm sorry. That is my favorite one from Magic Spoon. It really is like you open it up, and it's like you're smelling like fresh waffles. It's really great. I love cereal, as most people know. I have it every single day, and Magic Spoon is definitely my go-to.
Now, Yates, obviously, his throat hurts today, so I'm not going to ask him about his cereal intake because he's just on a strict chamomile tea diet. But for all of you out there that are looking, like I said, to get something healthier around the holidays, or maybe just, turn over a new leaf in the new year, Magic Spoon is that thing for you. So go to magicspoon.com/fantasypros, grab your custom bundle today. Again, they've got so many different flavors there. We just mentioned a few of them. And use that promo code fantasypros when you do to get $5 off of your first order there. So that, again, is magicspoon.com/fantasypros. And the promo code is fantasypros. And they guarantee 100% happiness, which is something all of us deserve at life. And Magic Spoon is going to give that to you. So let's see what the quarterbacks can give us in Week 14. Dan Harris, let's start with you here. Who are you adding at the quarterback position in Week 14?
It's got to be Taysom Hill. Unless, by the way, I'm asking this because I haven't seen it. Do we think he's going to be able to play through the finger injury, right? Like, okay, because it really doesn't matter if he can throw the ball or not.
I was going to say, as long as it's not a foot injury, really, do we care?
Now, I know he gets a very, very, very tough matchup here with the Jets, so we'll have to know. He obviously has a fantastic matchup against the Jets, and he is a complete difference maker. I cost myself a playoff spot or at least a chance at a playoff spot, by starting Derek Carr over him this week. What he can do with his legs is just absolutely dynamite. So for the most part, I feel like this week, guys, I feel like I'm probably going to rank him top 12 at the quarterback position, or at least borderline. So that's a must pickup unless you are absolutely set at quarterback. He's the obvious choice for me.
Yeah, he's a top 5 overall ad for me this week too,
Yes.
regardless of a single quarterback league, and you guys obviously agree. But yeah, it's also just to have him on your roster, not somebody else. But I guess you run that risk then, Dan, of when you have him on your roster and you have a quarterback who's in that fringe of QB1 that you've been playing all year, and you start to get that temptation of playing Taysom Hill over him. Are you going to start looking to do that over those Kirk Cousins and Derek Carrs of the world who are on that fringe of QB12?
Yes,
Okay.
because I do think that for the most part, Hill is going to just give you such an incredible floor with his rushing ability that I will take that at this point, because even guys like Derek Carr, again, who had a fantastic matchup coming into the week with Washington and then just didn't deliver, and they can all do that. I mean, Cousins too. Cousins is going to be right on the borderline because Cousins has been pretty reliable. But yeah, I just think like there are probably guys, like 10 quarterbacks that we're just locking in our lineup at this point right now. We still have a bunch of teams on bye coming into this week. So I do think that he's going to be right above that cut, Joe, of where we're like, I got to figure out which one of these streaming messes I'm going to go with. He's going to be at the top of the streaming mess for me.
The top of the streaming mess. Would you start him over Russell Wilson?
Ooh, it's actually interesting. Wilson looked a little better against Houston. I could see them just running the ball nonstop. My guess is that's going to be within like a spot or two of my ranking. So I won't make my final call on it, but I'm glad that I will not have to make that decision.
I don't want to pressure you. I just was curious early on.
Thank you. I felt pressured.
Now, look, Taysom Hill, obviously, Yates, a great matchup this week. Going forward, though, he's got Tampa. In Tampa, then against Miami defense that's found itself again in Carolina's defense. So those are some tougher matchups. Taysom Hill worth that ad, and is he worth consideration in any of those playoff matchups potentially for you?
Potentially, we need to see what he looks like as a passer, because with Tampa, you can throw on them. And I do think that at least he'll still bring the solid floor with his rushing ability, which is his best trait. So I think with Taysom, we can at least rely on him as kind of a streamer in that, like in those matchups moving forward. So if Taysom is somehow available in like a 14-team league, I had to roll out Matt Ryan in a 14-team league this past week, and that was the best option on the waiver wire. So it's like, okay, if he's available in that 14-team league, then you are most likely just playing Taysom Hill. In a 12-team, 10-team, that gets a little bit closer where we have some better options available. So in those, specifically in those other matchups, but as far as like this week specifically, yes, you're firing up Taysom Hill as a borderline top 12 play. No questions asked.
I actually had to play Gardner Minshew in a Superflex league this week. I picked him up Sunday morning, threw him in there, and boy, oh boy, was I glad that I did.
So in our company's Superflex league here, we've got a league going on, and I have in this, my team sucks. I got just decimated by injury this year, like Christian McCaffrey, and just decimated by injury. But my quarterback situation is actually pretty good. I've got Taysom Hill, I had Gardner Minshew on the bench. I had like 5 viable starting options. Taylor Heineke in there too. And I was just like, I'm 3-9 at this point. Like, who cares? I benched Derek Carr for Gardner Minshew just to feel something, and it worked out. Yeah. It worked out.
So you don't feel dead inside. I love that.
I will say that I think, if my calculations are correct, that Gardner Minshew will be the reason that my Scott Fishbowl team makes the playoffs. Just because I picked him up, because I'm so decimated at quarterback. That he is I think we're just the Gardner Minshew fan club. Did you see the video of him and his dad celebrating after?
Actually,
you guys got to watch. You guys got to go see that.
That.
Fantastic.
I'm a fan. Look, it's a good story, if nothing else. Awesome. Now, at the quarterback position, you have Cam Newton coming off that bad loss. He gets Atlanta this week. That should be, after the bye, a good matchup, again, in theory, for him. Taylor Heineke put up his normal 16-point day, and you can live with that. Teddy Bridgewater gets the Detroit Lions. Then you got Justin Fields, tough matchup against the Green Bay Packers. So Yates and these other quarterbacks worth adding for you here if you have, again, bye week issues here where on week 14.
All of them kind of fall into the same tier as far as fab. Like, they're all just minimal fab bids. But I think Taylor Heineke has just continued to get it done. Yeah. So he's at number 2 for me. Justin Fields, I'm adding this week because I think that he has the best playoff opportunity to be able to push a team over the top in the playoffs. He gets Minnesota in week 15, Seattle in week 16, and then the Giants in week 17. Those are fine matchups, especially for Fields, if he is set close to returning, which it sounds like he's getting close. So not going to play him this week necessarily against Green Bay, but the playoff matchup, you're picking him picking him up if you are set to make the playoffs. And then Teddy Bridgewater against Detroit, sure, you can get away with it. Cam Newton against Atlanta, I want to play Cam Newton against Atlanta, but I don't know if I'm going to. Like, you are playing him because he's available on your waiver wire and you're desperate. Like, that's kind of the range that he falls in.
Dan Harris, quarterback's not named Taysom Hill for you.
You are not picking up any of these guys unless you're in a very deep league or you accidentally dropped every quarterback on your roster. But Cam
hate it when that happens.
I hate it. It happens to me like once out of every 6 weeks. I would pick up Cam first, mainly because I'm not going to start Taylor Heineke or Justin Fields or Teddy Bridgewater. I can't, if I'm making the playoffs, Joe, there's no way I got to start any of these guys. I can't imagine it. Cam is a guy who's a 1 week guy, right? Because you're not going to start him the next week against Buffalo. But as much as I don't I would not feel comfortable with Cam after what we saw against Miami, because if you feel comfortable with Cam, you are not doing fantasy correctly. But I do think that there is a scenario. I'll probably have him ranked top 16 just because there's so much potential there. And I can't imagine, the Miami defense has played much better, obviously, of late. The Atlanta defense is far more exploitable. So my guess is, especially without CMC, he finds the end zone in this one. If he can just complete more than 25% of his passes, he at stay in the game.
It's a big ask.
It's a big ask. He'll probably finish like a top 15 guy. So if you're desperate, I could see picking him up as a 1 week streamer. I want none of these guys other than Hill for the long term.
It's funny, you guys with Cam Newton lately. It's all this new number who dis. All of a sudden, when he's texting you a couple weeks ago, was look at Cam Newton, he's back, right? What happened, guys? He's just fickle.
Completed
Went
5
for
21.
That was all. But did you watch him play last year? He wasn't any good last year either. Goodness gracious. But you know what? I want to ask this question too about the tight ends, because this is very important here, because we talk so much about KJ Osborn. I want to talk about Tyler Conklin. He's my number one ad again this week. He was my number one ad last week too. I know last week he didn't really work very well, but this week he had 9 targets in that game. He's got Pittsburgh, Chicago, Rams, Green Bay. Again, we talked about the playoff schedule being tougher here, but to me, that's the clear waiver wire ad at tight end this week. Dan, who do you see as the waiver wire tight end you want to pick up?
He's in a tier unto himself, in my opinion, Joe, with you. Again, with the Thielen injury, the targets have to go somewhere, and we saw it in this one. And Conklin's been a guy that we've been trying to find a reason to sort of, justify picking up, because we see the potential that's there. But he is the only guy at this point who I think can really make a huge impact. And again, his last 2 games, 11 targets, 7 targets, and now no Thielen. He's the guy, and he's a clear number 1 for me.
All right, Yates, how about you at tight end? Where are you going this week?
Yep, it's Conklin for me as well. Just looking at the vacated targets there in Minnesota, the opportunity for him. And so you look at, especially at the tight end position, you look at 1 to 2 week plays, unless there's a guy who's really starting to emerge. And it's okay, where am I going to rank these guys? And Tyler Conklin up against Pittsburgh with no Adam Thielen, probably, tight end 13, tight end 14. That's probably going to be where he lands in my rankings. And then we get to Evan Ingram, Cole Kmet. Foster Moreau, who was close. He had the end zone target last week, but that was disappointment with Moreau. So, yeah, and then, Gerald Everett. Goodness, Gerald Everett. Evan Ingram, I'm not going near Evan Ingram. As a mid-range tight end 2, that's really it. Then Cole Kmet, I think you can get away with him, but up against Green Bay, really not wanting to play that game. So it's Tyler Conklin, and that's kind of where I'm viewing him, as a 1 to 2 week play with Adam Thielen out. I think you can add Conklin and feel confident plugging him into your lineup if you have a need at the tight end position.
By the way, I'm sorry. I need to correct. Sorry, very quickly. I had just pulled up. I thought I had Conklin's page up. I had Kmet's page up.
I was about to say, he did not see those targets.
I apologize. He saw 9 targets, I think, in this last game, Conklin, right? But he wasn't getting, but again, that's without Adam Thielen. That's really the difference maker. Kmet is my number 2, by the way, and that was what I was sort of prepared. I wanted to look up to make sure I had the numbers right. 11 targets, 7 targets the last 2 games. He is getting involved enough for me to basically want to at least take a look at him. But again, it is Conklin, and it is really because of the Thielen injury.
Yeah, and by the way, Cole Kmet, 0 touchdowns on the year, 0, and that's the problem.
Yeah. Have you watched Chicago?
Well, yeah, you're right, but that's the problem with Kmet's fantasy value is if you're a tight end that has 0 touchdown equity, it's almost impossible for you to be a tight end.
Still got Jimmy Graham hanging around.
Yeah, I know.
Touchdowns, good.
Right.
I know.
Yeah.
But when that changes, that Cole Kmet all of a sudden becomes, and I was hoping it would change faster this year, but it's a little slower. That's okay. Maybe 2022 it'll happen. Let's talk about our top 5 waiver wire ads of week 14. For me, it's DeVante Parker, number 1. I don't care about the bye. Then Russell Gage, Kenneth Gainwell at 3, KJ Osborn at 4, and Taysom Hill at 5. Dan Harris, who are your top 5 ads this week?
Osborn is number 1. That's Taysom Hill, number 2, followed by Gage, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and DeVante Parker, number 5. So, all those 5 guys I think can help you pretty immediately.
All right, Yates, who are your top 5 ads this week?
I've got Russell Gage at number 1, KJ Osborn at number 2. Either of them I'm fine with the top waiver wire priority. Taysom Hill at number 3, DeVante Parker at 4, and then, guys, this is a perfect segue. We didn't even plan this, but the Los Angeles Chargers DST at number 5.
All right, so talk about it. Why are the Chargers your favorite streaming D of the week?
Chargers are coming off a massive performance here against Cincinnati, which is a very solid offense, and then they get to take on potentially either Mike Glennon or Jake Fromm, who, like I mentioned, Jake Fromm being there for a week is not going to know this playbook. I liked Fromm coming out of college, but not to the level where I think he's going to match up well against the Chargers. The Giants cannot run the ball effectively with Saquon Barkley. It's just not happening. So, and this is really interesting. Like, we go down the DST list. I'm like, yeah, I could play them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can play all of these options.
Great
week for DST, and every other position we're like, yeah, it's great, but DST, man, let's get excited for this.
Below all the fab. I mean, you're 100% right here. And for me, it's funny because my number 1 ad is the Packers, because I'm looking at the Packers and their playoff schedule. They're going to face Baltimore, who's been struggling offensively. They get Chicago next week. Then they have Cleveland, Minnesota in the playoffs as well. So that looks pretty good to me for the Packers for long-term ad. But you're right, Broncos against Detroit. Actually, they're at home against Detroit. Then the Tennessee Titans at home against Jacksonville. The Saints on the road against the Jets. The Panthers at home against Atlanta. And your Chargers, as you were talking about with the Giants. It is tough out there. Dan Harris.
Seahawks at Houston.
Seahawks at Houston's not bad.
Rod Taylor is out. And not that necessarily even just makes it more enticing. With Rod Taylor, we just found out, he's going to be out next week. So, yeah, any of those 7. And yeah, for me, Joe, Saints, are the number 1. But it's the exact same for me. If you look at my overall defensive, I think all 6 of them or 7 of them are just bang, 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 bang in my overall rankings, because you could flip a coin and choose whichever one you want. I like the Saints a little bit more just because it's against the Jets, and despite Zach Wilson, accounting for 3 touchdowns, I think they're a matchup to exploit. Packers are great. Chargers are great. Broncos are great. Seahawks are great. Panthers are great. And the Titans are great. Just stream away. This is the best streaming week I've seen, I think, all year.
Yeah.
Which brings us to a sadder conversation, kickers. So let's talk about kickers here. Matt Prater is the guy I'm going to add this week. Again, when you're looking for offenses that might have to settle for 3s instead of 7s. And against the Rams, I wonder if that's going to be the case there for the Arizona offense. So I'll go with Prater this week. Dan Harris, who do you want to stream at kicker?
I put McPherson, for the Bengals up top, but him and Prater are the 2 guys that I want the most. I think that the game against the 49ers in Cincinnati is probably going to be close. It's probably going to be more of a field goal game than a touchdown game in that one. So I will take McPherson narrowly ahead of Prater, who is, I think, also a great option here against the Rams, where I do think I can see them keeping Arizona out of the end zone a little bit more, but not stopping them from moving the ball as much.
Yates, your streaming kicker of 14.
I love it when you 2 go ahead of me and we have the same 2 players, so that way I don't have to talk a ton about kickers, because I got Matt Prater at 1, man. Evan McPherson at number 2.
Note to self, put Kyle quickly. 3rd every week at kickers.
Keep moving on, because I know what Dan's about. No.
No, you don't know what I'm about to say. I am in a charity league, which I may have mentioned before, with Cooter Doodle. And the best part is it has a couple of spots with very weird scoring. One of them is kickers, where you get points for missed kicks. You miss an extra point, it's 15 points.
What?
You miss a 30-yard field goal.
I could get on board with that.
Why?
I'm not kidding. What I do, and we're in the finals now of it, is I have multiple kickers. That's where I am I need a bunch of options because it's like a best ball.
So Justin Tucker's worth nothing in that league.
Justin Tucker is whatever, but yesterday I picked up Dustin Hopkins. I was like, Will and I are watching it, and we see Hopkins miss the extra point, and it is the biggest celebration. That's how we should play fantasy football with kickers. Do that in your league going forward. That's true.
Next. I got nothing on that one. Nothing. We're getting points for missing kicks. It's just all the logic is gone.
The closer the kick, the more points you get for missing. So do that.
Lord. All right, let's move on to the guys we can keep or drop here. Lightning round. David Johnson, Dan Harris, 49% rostered, keep or drop.
49% is abysmal.
That's ridiculous.
I'm just telling you, that's the number.
He's right in that 2016 season still all the way.
Go ahead and drop David Johnson, everyone.
Okay. Just saying, Yates, I assume you say the same?
Yeah, that is a big-time drop.
Kadarius Toney. This man makes me sad. Keep or drop, 47%, Yates.
I think you can drop him. When are you going to feel confident playing Toney throughout the fantasy playoffs at this point?
No more Giants. No Kenny Galladay. No Giants at all. None. Dan Harris, Kadarius Toney, keep or drop.
I concur with my much younger colleague. Yes, I agree.
Much younger. Stunning number here on Austin Walter, by the way. 41% rostered on CBS. I couldn't believe
What?
it. Myself. I know. 41% rostered. People ran to the waiver wire after that touchdown a couple weeks ago.
Goodness.
So, and once again, way more rostered than Jordan Howard, as I was pointing out earlier, which makes zero sense to me. But Dan Harris, Austin Walter, your guy, New York Jets, keep or drop.
I'm now convinced that there is somebody out there with 17,000 fantasy leagues who is just rostering both David Johnson and Austin Walter.
And his name is Austin Walter.
To explain this roster percentage, obviously drop Austin Walter. Like, stop what you're doing right now and drop him. That's ridiculous.
I couldn't believe that number. Yates, Austin Walter, yes, drop. Yes.
Yeah,
okay,
drop him.
Sterling Shepard, we talked about some people wanting to add him, but he's still 34% rostered. I think it's time to drop, right, Yates?
Who did you say?
Sterling Shepard.
Sterling Shepard. Yeah, again, it's kind of the same argument with Tony. When are you going to feel confident playing him moving forward?
All right, Dan Harris dropping Sterling Shepard.
Yeah.
All right, last one here, just 25% roster, but I want to throw this name out because he was a kitschy name for a few weeks. Brian Edwards, 25% roster. Keep or drop, Dan?
Drop.
Yeah,
drop.
Just because, I mean, with you drop him because, and we talked about this on last week's Tuesday show, it's like pick up a high-level insurance running back in favor of, Brian Edwards. Go pick up Ronald Jones. Go pick up Marlon Mack instead of.
And speaking of which,
Brian
now
Edwards.
too, with Kenyon Drake's injury, there's another open running back position for somebody else to start to fill some voids there. So
Adrian Peterson's like.
Adrian Peterson, there he goes, right there.
There you go. To the Raiders, Adrian Peterson. Well, I'm surprised he hasn't played for the Raiders yet. You would think that's on the checklist there. So we'll see how it all goes. Keep your eye on Adrian Peterson's next destination and more over FantasyPros.com. And remember, make sure you go ahead and use our waiver assistant part of My Playbook at FantasyPros.com/MyPlaybook to help you set all of your waiver wire adds and drops for this week. And don't forget about FantasyPros.com, our contest for the Alvin Kamara giveaway. That jersey is going to be available for one of you, so go ahead and add it today. All you have to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, our glorious YouTube channel that has every single podcast, and then go to fantasypros.com/contest and enter today to get that Alvin Kamara jersey. And don't forget too, while we're at it, to get yourself a box of Magic Spoon. I mean, I just sit here and sometimes eat on the podcast waiting for Dan Harris. The talk is going to crumple and stuff like that, but I love the Magic Spoon. There's the magicspoon.com/fantasypros and use that promo code fantasypros, and that's delicious to get $5 off your first order there. And again, if you're watching the YouTube channel, you can watch me eat the Magic Spoon, which is magical, believe it, and it's good for you too. Just like this show, magical and good for you. On that note, that'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Dan Harris and Kyle Yates, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids. Where's the milk?
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.